It is truly amazing what the return of Desmond Bane has done for the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies went wire to wire, overtime with the Sacramento Kings, but I don't want to talk about Desmond Bane and what he did. I want to talk about the center matchup, Jaren Jackson Jr. versus Domantas Sabonis, because at the end of the day, I got a takeaway from this game. And my takeaway isn't probably going to be a popular one because Jaren Jackson Jr. only had 2 rebounds, but I can still see him possibly now being the center for the Grizzlies next season. I'm going to tell you why here in a second, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. I did not make the trip out west on this road trip, but I'm here in Memphis, Tennessee, going solo today as Joe Mullinax is getting, a well-deserved day off. Shout out to my guy, Joe Mullinax. All the great things he's done to help Locked On Grizzlies, and all the great things you guys do as well. Make sure you continue to like, comment, rate, review, subscribe to all things Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. All you got to do is post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies today. And just to give you a preview of what we're going to talk about on today's show, we're going to recap the game in our first segment. You heard me in the opening. I know some of you probably like, Damichael, don't start with this Jaren Jackson Jr. center stuff. But listen, I see a pathway for this thing to possibly work, and we'll see who I convince and who says no, Damichael, you still don't make any sense after the second segment. But we'll get to that a little bit in a few minutes here in our second segment. Then in the third segment, we'll talk about some roster changes because, believe it or not, after the Grizzlies just unveiled their 42nd lineup of the season, some roster changes were made. So we'll talk about that in the final segment as well. But let's recap the game first off. It was a competitive game, which is good. Even though the Grizzlies are at a point this season where they're not competing for playoff spots and all of those things, they still need to be competitive. They need to be competitive. They need to be respectable. I say competitive because I was trying to say competitive and respectable at the same time. But yeah, that's you get the point. Like the difference this year at this point of the season is you don't want to be embarrassing out there. And I think with Desmond Bane coming back, looks like a completely different team. Who knows if Luke Kennard would have played? He missed the game for personal reasons. Congratulations to Luke Kennard and the Mrs. as well over there. They're expecting a baby here really soon, which is why he's out for personal reasons right now. So if he would have played, maybe some things shift. But you got good minutes from John Conchar. You got good minutes from Jake LaRavia. G.G. Jackson, another solid performance for him, which I really want to spotlight here for a second because there's been this whole question, some people, and I think me and Joe actually talked about it a little bit in our last show about the fact that with Desmond Bane being back, one thing that is important to watch going forward is the idea of how he fits alongside of Desmond Bane, G.G. Jackson, that is. How G.G. Jackson fits alongside of Desmond Bane is one of the biggest keys to watch for the remainder of the season. If you watch that first game, he was a little timid in the first half, wasn't really shooting that much, just passing the ball, getting out of the way, letting Desmond Bane do his thing. But Des has kind of just said this message to him over and over, like, just because I'm back, don't change anything. Keep playing your game. And we saw that in the second half of the OKC game, and it carried over, in my opinion, in this game. G.G. Jackson was solid. 22 points, 7 rebounds, still no assists. Like, you're going to have to work on the playmaking. Like, it's probably going to take a little bit more time. But 8 of 13 shooting from the field, 4 of 8 on three-pointers. But what stood out to me the most was 3 steals. And this is something As the sample size gets bigger, we're going to really dive into what's going on with GG Jackson here on the defensive end. Sample size isn't big enough yet, but over the last couple games, do you know who guarded Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to start that game? It's GG Jackson. Then in the second half, he guarded Jalen Williams a little bit more, the other terrific young scorer at OKC. This game, he starts out on De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox went to the bench in the first quarter. Well, no sweat. Malik Monk's coming in. Let me get him. Let me get the potential sixth man of the year, who, by the way, just cooked the Grizzlies in this game. But we'll get to that in a second. But GG Jackson, taking on those type of assignments and being able to produce on the offensive end stood out to me. He played 44 minutes. No one played more minutes on the Grizzlies. No one played more minutes in the game, period, than GG Jackson. 44 minutes played while guarding De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, while getting 7 boards, while shooting efficiently, 8 of 13 from the field, 4 of 8 from the three-point line. I'm impressed, man. And when I say I'm impressed, this is a different type of impressed. I'm well past the point of GG Jackson being an impact NBA player. I think many of you are beyond that point. I've kind of been stuck on next season, GG Jackson is in the rotation, right? He's in the rotation somewhere. You bring him off the bench, and he's kind of that spark plug, not quite Malik Monk maybe yet, but eventually something like that, maybe even better. But he's that scoring volume scorer that you need coming off the bench, that the Grizzlies historically, franchise history, just haven't had much of. He's that type of guy. Well, guess what? After watching him in this game against the Kings, against the Thunder, there's a pathway eventually to see this guy as a starter. Because you look at the Grizzlies, Ja Morant, you know what he's going to do. Desmond Bane, he's good to guard your second best perimeter player, the opposing team's second best perimeter player. If you're going against, I guess Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, for example, you put him on Bradley Beal. So I think that's a solid way to look at it for Desmond Bane. That other guy, that wing, where it's Marcus Smart right now, who's pretty much occupied the starting role. And we talked about Vince Williams. I mean, some of you have even said it. I've read the comments and people have said it to me as well, that Vince Williams should be the starter next season. Marcus Smart should come off the bench. What if I said, maybe it's still too early. I don't know. But I'm going to say it anyway, because it's only been 2 games, but we've seen it against Shai Gilgeous and De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk and Jalen Williams. Like it's not going to get too much more difficult than that. What if I say, I'm not saying he should be the starter, not yet at least, but throw GG Jackson's name in that conversation as a third guy. Marcus Smart, yeah, you already know. That's a vet. He's proven. Been there, done that, got to the finals, got to the Eastern Conference Finals. You know what he brings to the table. Then there's the other guy, Vince Williams. Played himself into this perfect, like he's just the perfect role player, 3-point shooting. He's added some playmaking to his game. The defensive ability is top tier. Kevin Durant is complimented him. Luka Doncic is complimented him. Like he is getting, as Shaq says, top certified notifications from like the best players in the NBA. But I'm watching GG Jackson, the activity at 6'9", the ability to move his feet. He has the makings. And it's still too early at this point. Like it's because he's not strong enough yet, and there are going to be those Kawhi Leonard type matchups where he just gets bullied a little bit. So he's not strong enough yet, but the shoulders are there. Like you see the size, and GG Jackson can be that type of guy. I say you throw his name in that conversation. Why not? He has the ability. Taylor Jenkins is now putting him in those positions. Taylor Jenkins said it. He said, he wants to challenge GG Jackson. They want to challenge GG Jackson? Go out there and guard Shai Gilgeous. Go out there and guard, Jalen Williams. Go out there and guard De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk. All guys that are shorter than him, really quick guys that a lot of NBA teams and players struggle against. So I really want to monitor his progression in that area of defense for the rest of the season as well. But we got to monitor it, for the rest of the season because it wasn't all great. Like, I don't want to say like he just locked these guys down. I mean, Malik Monk couldn't be stopped in overtime. He finished with 28 points. I think 12 of those came in the overtime period. The Grizzlies actually scored the first 2 points of overtime. The problem was the Kings scored the next 12. The Kings went on a 12-0 run after the Grizzlies scored the first 2 points of overtime. And that was all she wrote. That put the game away, and Malik Monk scored the first 8 of the 12-0 run. He scored 8 consecutive points, then got an assist to Domantas Sabonis on the 10th point, the 9th and 10th points, I guess, for the Kings. So he was tough to stop. G.G. Jackson and no other Grizzlies player really had an answer for him down the stretch of the game. So, I mean, that was that. But overall, I think a solid performance for the Grizzlies. Jaren Jackson Jr., G.G. Jackson, Desmond Bane, Jake LaRavia. Probably talk about him more later in the show because he was solid again. Terrific all-around solid performance for the guys out there, but they fell just short for a variety of reasons. And one of those reasons that some of you think they fell short for is Jaren Jackson Jr. and his production from a rebounding standpoint or just overall production at center. And some of you may say, oh, Jaren was the reason that we were in the game. Depends on which side of the token of the coin you are on. We're going to talk about this whole Jaren Jackson Jr. conversation at center in a second. But before we get to that, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Stitch Fix. So here's the thing about Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost that you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? Well, that's me. That's what I get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you can get a stylist who understands your style, your size, and your budget because they do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season as we're going from that cold winter weather. Now we're getting into the springtime. If you're over here in the Memphis area, and some of you are still getting a lot of that cold weather. But with all that being said, here's the thing. Look, I just give my stylist my size, my style, budget preferences, and I just order the boxes when I want and how I want. And there's no subscription required. They just send 5 just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I keep that works. I keep what works because it's simply, they just send back the rest. My stylist always sends just right pieces and the fit is always on point. It's like they have this ESP. I don't know how to do it, but they just get me right every single time. And if you don't love something, just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. Look, if you're anything like me, I don't like to shop. And Stitch Fix saves me that time and effort. Plus, I get the outfits that make me look good. And if I look good, I'm going to be feeling really good. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/locked-on. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to make the case. Jaren Jackson Jr. as a potential center for the Grizzlies beyond this season. Don't close the door on it. We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, a beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Appreciate you guys for tuning in as we recap yesterday's game. The Grizzlies lost 121-111 against the Sacramento Kings. And in the first segment, we talked about a variety of things that happened in that game. And you've been following along now through Locked On Grizzlies. You know that I'm a matchups guy. And I feel like basketball, more so than many other sports, is when you can be that way. You can be matchup driven. And the matchup that stood out to me in this game, before the game, like going into the game, was Jaren Jackson Jr. against Domantas Sabonis. Domantas Sabonis is one of the best centers in the NBA. He leads the NBA rebounds per game. He, after this game, recorded his 50th consecutive double-double of the season. And Jaren Jackson Jr. is a little bit different. Jaren Jackson Jr. spent most of his career at power forward. In the last month or so, with Steven Adams being out for the season and eventually getting traded, Bismack Biyombo being waived, Xavier Tillman being traded, with all these moves in the front court, it's kind of cleared the pathway for the Grizzlies to kind of put Jaren Jackson Jr. at center. And I've said this a couple times on the show because when I'm talking about Jaren Jackson Jr. and the idea of him being a center, I want you guys to know, like, some of this is my opinion and some of this is what I'm hearing around the team. So that's why we're projecting it this way. But I keep saying it. do not close the door on opening day next season, Jaren Jackson Jr. being the starting center. And I know some of you are throwing up and saying, no, Damichael, it's not happening. We don't want that to happen. Look, here's the thing. There is a reason that right now, Jaren Jackson Jr. is exclusively playing center. Think about it. Think real hard about it. Do you see him in the game playing alongside Trey Jemison? Did you see him in the game when Wenyen Gabriel was here? When Wenyen Gabriel was at center, see Jaren being moved to power forward? Do you see Santi Aldama playing center with Jaren at power forward? No. Jaren is playing more center than he ever has in his career, and he's pretty much been exclusively at center over the last month. Like that's his position right now. He's not a power forward right now. He is a center for the Memphis Grizzlies. So what that tells me, and should tell you as well, is that the Grizzlies are using this period as an evaluation period for Jaren Jackson Jr. and the option of him being the future center. The option. Not that he's the future. This is not, we're making Jaren the future center. Let's go ahead and, give him some reps now. This is preparing for the option. Like, optionality is the theme of the Grizzlies offseason because they could go a bunch of different ways in addressing that fifth starter spot. And one of the options is getting the center. And the other option is putting a different type of player alongside of Jaren Jackson Jr., which is what I want to talk about a little bit. You say Jaren can't be the center, Damichael. He can't rebound. Yeah, he only had 2 rebounds in this game. And guess what? Domantas Sabonis had 18. It wasn't a fair matchup. And in fact, Jaren didn't have a rebound in the first half. When Jaren recorded his first rebound, it's a little bit more than 5 minutes left in the third quarter. 10 seconds later, Domantas Sabonis snagged the rebound. It was his 10th. So basically, when Jaren recorded his first rebound of the game, Sabonis recorded his 10th. I get it. I know that's frustrating to some of you, especially after you just watch Steven Adams clean the glass, like Windex. Then you watch Jonas Valanciunas clean the glass before that the same way. And historically, we're talking about guys like Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, Stromile Swift, Lorenzen Wright. Like, Memphis historically hasn't had a problem with rebounders. But Jaren Jackson Jr. being the starting center, it would prevent that. I mean, it would actually create that. I mean, there would be some rebounding problems there. But here's the difference. I think the answer, if you say the Grizzlies say they're going to put Jaren Jackson Jr. at center, the answer is put players around him in the starting lineup, whether it's guys who come off the bench, who are superior rebounders for their position. Let's get into this game in particular, because guess what? Despite Jaren Jackson Jr.'s rebound numbers, the fact that Domantas Sabonis finished the game with 18 boards and Jaren Jackson Jr. only finished with 2 boards, the Grizzlies still had more second chance points. The Grizzlies has 23 second chance points. The Sacramento Kings had 17. The Kings won the overall rebound advantage 59-49, but I contribute that more to math. The Grizzlies shot 37.8% from the field. The Kings shot 44.7%. So the Grizzlies had more missed shots, which led to some of those offensive rebounds as well. But the point is, the Grizzlies hung in there on the glass. They hung in the game on the glass, despite Jaren Jackson Jr.'s weaknesses as a rebounder. You know why? Because John Conchar in the starting lineup, 10 rebounds. Jake LaRavia off the bench, 8 rebounds. Santi Aldama in the starting lineup had 9 rebounds. So, G.G. Jackson as well, 7 boards. Desmond Bane, 5 boards. I think if you put 2 or 3 guys in the starting lineup with Jaren Jackson Jr., who are effective rebounders for their positions, you're fine. You are good. You're not the past Grizzlies teams that with Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas that led the league in rebounding, but you are serviceable enough to reach your goal of being a championship caliber team. Vince Williams Jr., he's that guy. He has a better total rebound percentage than Jaren Jackson Jr. John Conchar, he's not going to start, but he's a guy who can play in the rotation. Like we said, in this game, John Conchar had 10 boards. That's another guy with a better total rebound percentage than Jaren Jackson Jr. You know who's another guy? Brandon Clark. What about putting Brandon Clark beside him, Jaren? Brandon Clark has a total rebound percentage of over 14% in 3 of his 4 seasons in the NBA. Jaren Jackson Jr. has never had a total rebounding percentage of 14%. The idea of putting Jaren at center and putting players like Brandon Clark, Vince Williams, John Conchar, Desmond Bain is an effective rebounder. John Morant is an effective rebounder as well. They're not the great ones like I think Vince Williams and John Conchar are for their positions. The point is, if you put a great rebounder alongside of Jaren Jackson Jr., a couple of them, I think that can help offset the difference there because we talk about his weaknesses a lot. Jaren Jackson Jr. gives you a lot of strengths that Steven Adams didn't give you, that Valanciunas didn't give you to a certain level. He stretches the floor on the offensive end with his ability to shoot the 3 ball. He's still strong. Like he's not weak. I mean, Sabonis wasn't just moving him out of the way. Jaren Jackson Jr. actually had his way in the second half a little bit. After starting 1 for 9, he still finished with 25 points because of his ability to go at Sabonis. And we've seen it with other centers. He dominated the Sun center, Yusuf Nurkic. He's win at Jokic, in several matchups in the past and whatnot. Like guarding centers, not a problem either. 4 blocks in this game while playing center. He's still having another terrific all defensive caliber season while playing a lot of minutes at center. So if you factor in rim protection, defense, the ability to stretch the 4 from the 5 spot, all of those things are strengths that Jaren Jackson Jr. gives you that a lot of centers don't. But we focus a lot on that weakness, which is a big one. That rebounding weakness is a huge one for him. But there is a way, I think. There's a pathway. Because if you watch this game, this was a good example. The Grizzlies were right there. And if you put a John Morant or something in the lineup, or Luke Kennard maybe even, like they possibly even win this game despite Jaren's rebounding struggles because you have a John Conchar. Let's say you flip that. That's Vince Williams eventually. Or you have, a Brandon Clark type guy. Or, even if you want to think outside of the box on another team, a guy like Jared Vanderbilt, he's one that stands out to me. Remember when he was in Minnesota, he was snagging all those boards when he was starting against the Grizzlies in the playoffs, that first round series. And even, with the Lakers to a certain degree. Like there are other wings and big forwards out there who are solid rebounders that you can put alongside of Jaren, and that'll help mask the difference enough to me where it offsets it because of his offensive game, the ability to stretch the floor and all those things that he brings to the table, and plus his ability to be a rim protector, which we saw with 4 big blocks in this game. I'm not closing the door on Jaren Jackson Jr. yet as a potential center for this team. I still want to see a little bit more. I'm not saying he's the answer. I want to see a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised. Would not be surprised. And that's why I'm talking about it. You haven't heard a lot of people talk about that option because people just automatically assume that the Grizzlies are going to go get an outside center. And yes, they may go get one for depth. Might go get a backup. But it is very realistic to think that the Grizzlies will say, hey, Jaren Jackson Jr. did enough. We're going to rebound better as a team. The rebounding isn't going to be on him. They're playing him at center right now, and they know they see the numbers just like we do with his rebounding. Like they're very well aware of it as well. So with all that being said, don't close the door on the idea yet. Jaren Jackson Jr. very well could be the starting center for the Grizzlies next season. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to talk about some roster changes because after this game, there are a couple moves that have just been made about the Grizzlies. We'll talk about that here in a second. But before we get to that, this episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Look, LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. And that's why you got to go take advantage of these opportunities over at LinkedIn Jobs. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Again, you can go post your job at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about the changes on the roster. A couple changes that are really going to affect this team going forward. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I'm Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee, recapping what we talked about up to this point. We recapped the game between the Grizzlies and the Kings, and I talked about the idea of Jaren Jackson Jr. being at center. This is not a new topic. We've talked about this before. We talked about it a few times, and we've actually even pretty much headlined episodes before talking about this. But I think this Kings game, this matchup against Domantas Sabonis, was a big one in showing us that the Grizzlies can be relevant if they choose to put Jaren Jackson Jr. at center. Like, I don't think it's a doom type of situation if he's your center, if you put the right pieces around him. That's the big if. But with all that being said, speaking of the right pieces, the Grizzlies recently lost a couple pieces. DeJon Jarreau and Wenyen Gabriel's 10-day contracts have officially expired. Wenyen Gabriel's contract expired before the Kings game, actually. His expired after the Oklahoma City Thunder game. And DeJon Jarreau was right behind him, and his 10-day deal has expired. And you say, oh, Michael, that's not really, we barely used him, whatever the case may be. But it's a little bit deeper than that. The Grizzlies had 8 active players against the Sacramento Kings. Don't know if anyone noticed that. But 8 is the NBA required number to participate in the game. You have to have 8 active players at the beginning of a game. The Grizzlies barely made it. And Luke Kennard, as I said earlier, his wife, he and his wife are expecting. So that contributed to him being out for personal reasons. And then there was the long list of injuries that we've talked about, a lot. I mean, Vince Williams was out, Brandon Clark, John Morant, Scottie Pippen Jr., Derrick Rose, Marcus Smart, Lamar Stevens, Yuta Watanabe, Zaire Williams. Overall, you're talking about 10 guys. 10 guys were out for the Memphis Grizzlies. So now that you don't have DeJon Jarreau, because we got a lot of experience with 10-day contracts this season. So, you kind of get a feel for how Taylor Jenkins likes to use these things. And in the past, usually when guys get to that last day or so of the 10-day contract, Taylor Jenkins doesn't like to use them as much. We saw Jalen Noel, for example, was a huge part of the Grizzlies in that early December stretch and whatnot. But when he got to the last couple of days of that 10-day contract, Taylor kind of dialed back using him because the end was near. They had to start planning for the idea that he wasn't going to be on the team. And with Wenyen Gabriel, it was the same way. His last game, Oklahoma City Thunder game, played sparingly. That was that. DeJon Jarreau had to play real rotation minutes because there were only 8 guys left. Now, to replace DeJon Jarreau, you can get Jordan Goodwin back. Jordan Goodwin, as we all know, is on the 2-way contract limitations from restrictions from a game standpoint. He cannot play in every remaining game this season. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. Maybe I'll say it in the next show because you got to do the math. There's basically a whole equation to it based on when he was signed and the exact number of days in the NBA season, which is 174. So you divide those two numbers, times it by 50, and you get how many games Jordan Goodwin can play this season. But with all that being said, Jordan Goodwin cannot play in every game, which is why he was inactive for this past game. So you say, okay, take out DeJon Jarreau, you get Jordan Goodwin back. What if Luke Kennard still not back for the next game? What if he's still not back? What if Vince Williams? He's doubtful in this last game. I think you need Vince Williams back soon as well. We're talking about a situation where the Grizzlies could be struggling to get 8 guys, 9 guys on the floor going forward here. And hopefully no one that's actually currently playing goes through any injuries. But I know some of you may say, well, why not just re-sign one of those guys to a 10-day deal? Here's the thing about that. The Grizzlies have to have at least 4 players out multiple weeks with injury designation. Brandon Clark, I guess he technically still fits the mold of that conversation, but I don't think he does because Taylor Jenkins has alluded to the fact that he'll be back towards the end of this month. So you got John Morant, who's out for the season. That's one. I think Zaire Williams, you could use him. Maybe Derrick Rose is your other guy because Marcus Smart is the other. So that's four. If Derrick Rose fits the criteria of, by the NBA standards of he's out for at least 2 weeks, because all those other guys that I just mentioned, there haven't been any long-term injury designations given on. Like Scottie Pippen Jr. missed the game for left shin soreness. Lamar Stevens is dealing with a left abductor strain. He's missed the last couple games. Yuta Watanabe was out for personal reasons. Zaire Williams, we just touched on him. But if you have four guys, the Grizzlies can apply potentially for another 10-day injury hardship waiver, which will probably come in handy right now because of all the injury things that the team is dealing with. But just wanted to highlight those roster changes that we've seen the Grizzlies undergo as of late in 42 lineups in right now. 42 lineups, 42 starting lineups used at this point of the season. Man, we're probably going to see a couple more based on the way that this season is going. But as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. And for the baseball fans out there, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming up exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m., be there for the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, or it's for free at the Amazon Fire TV channels app as well. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies today. Tomorrow, me and Joe Monax will be back with you, and we just talked about all these things going on with the Grizzlies as well. And appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies all the way. And make sure that you continue to tune into the national channel as well, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is the name of it. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find the Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Stay tuned for what's next on Locked On Grizzlies. Me and Joe Monax back at it tomorrow as we break down all things Memphis Grizzlies as well. But appreciate you guys for tuning in. Remember that Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm Damichael Cole. We'll see you next time on Locked On Grizzlies.